Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to this week's edition of Advanced Bass Fishing, and really appreciate you guys swinging by and checking out the seminar today, and definitely grateful for having you guys around here because I know it takes a pretty good commitment. If you guys watch some of the advanced bass fishing videos, these are long videos, so I know it takes a lot of time out of your day, so much appreciated you guys checking the video out, and hope you guys get some good out of it and catch some fish as a result of it. Guys, today we're going to be giving probably the most in-depth tutorial ever on YouTube, fishing the Megabass Magdraft Swimbait. The reason I wanted to dedicate an entire video to this is without a doubt arguably the top, most popular, most productive swim bait on the market today, and it has been for about the past 5 years. Most every pro uses it. It's been a dominant force in the professional fishing world, even if a lot of guys don't talk about it. It's sort of like the Megabass Vision 110. It's like, that's one of those baits that all the pros fish and they don't talk about it because it conflicts with some of their sponsors. It's the same with the Megabass Magdraft. All the pros fish it, they don't talk about it because it's a conflict with some of their sponsors. But we're going to go into detail on everything about the bait. I'm going to describe, the characteristics of the bait, what it does, conditions that it works in. We're going to go over colors and different sizes of the Magdraft. Then we're going to get into the equipment to fish it in, and then we'll wrap it up at the end of the seminar with, like we always do, as far as the areas and the patterns you want to look for seasonally with the Magdraft. But I'm really excited to do this seminar, guys, because I'll tell you something right off the bat. Last year was my best year with the Magdraft. I've had them since they came out. I've been fishing them since the public even had them, and I've caught a lot of fish on them. But last year, I really dedicated a lot of time to fishing it, especially in tournaments, because it produces such quality fish. And I really saw how productive the bait was under the right conditions. So that's what we're really going to focus on here, is sort of lay out those conditions where the bait works the best. Also, guys, before we get started here, just wanted to go over some of the ways that you can give back to the channel. If you like the video and you get something out of it, the best thing you can do, guys, is just use all the links that are in my description, especially my Tackle Warehouse links. There's a bunch of good links in there for the sales, and by using that Tackle Warehouse link, the channel gets a small percentage of the commission if you buy anything from Tackle Warehouse. And then all of our solar bat links, everything that's in those descriptions is a good way to support the channel if you want to do that. We also set up a Patreon account, so if you guys would like to help the channel out through Patreon, you can do that as well through the links in the description. So much appreciated with all that. Okay, guys. Let's get into this. First of all, let's talk about the Magdraft itself, and we're gonna talk about how the bait's designed, what it's designed to do, and then we're gonna get into colors and all that type of stuff. But if you're not familiar with it, here's the Megabass Magdraft. Now there's 3 different sizes. You have the 6-inch size, which is by far the most popular. And then you've got the 8-inch model here, which a lot of people use in tournaments. And then you've got this big honkin' Mongo, the 10-inch one here, which is truly a big bass lure. It's a 10-inch long lure, weighs 6 ounces. So we're gonna go into every one of those in today's video, but I wanna sort of show you a little bit about the Magdraft, what makes it unique if you've never seen this before. First of all, it looks just like a fish. I mean, it looks like not any one specific type of a fish, but it's got the nice fish type body. And the unique thing about the Magdraft is the way it works through the water, because when you reel this thing through the water, the head on the thing sort of shimmies like that, and then you've got the big tail waggling like that. So you have a lot of visual appeal to the fish in cleaner water conditions. Thing looks like a live minnow coming through the water there. It's got a real slow sink to it on there, and that's the whole thing about the Magdraft. You can fish it in a lot of different water columns because it does sink. So you can fish it shallow, you can keep it close to the surface, or you can fish it a little bit deeper out there. And then one of the other really cool aspects of it is the way that the hook is designed on it. You've got a magnet on the belly here, which keeps this hook locked in place like that. And there's a slit that you see right here. And you take this hook and you put it in that slit, and it lays like that. Now, this slit is really important, which really sets it aside from a lot of different swim baits because it hides much of the hook here. And one of the biggest strike detractors, in my opinion, is you have a big old honking hook with a lot of hardware, but the way it sets in there, nice and streamlined, you don't really see it, and then you've got these 2 hooks that really get the fish good. Now, I tell you what, when I first started using the Magdraft, I was a little skeptical about hooking the fish the way that it's set up there, because you've only got 2 points in there. But the more I started using it, guys, when they bite this thing, most of the time, you don't ever lose them. Once in a while, you're going to get some short strikers on the tail, but when they eat this thing, those 2 hooks separates from like that, and very seldom will I lose one once they eat it. So that's sort of the unique thing about the design of the bait. Now, I want to talk a little bit about different sizes first, and we're going to get into colors as far as different colors that I like, and we'll get into some more situational awareness here. First of all, let's talk about the small one, the 6-inch one. The 6-inch one is the go-to for most everybody. It works in a wide range of conditions. It works on lakes that have smaller fish in it, bigger fish, whatever. It's a really good lure to catch numbers and size both. I've caught a ton of like 1.25 pound fish on this swim bait here, guys, as well as some big ones on it. But one of probably the class of fish that it catches on average is sort of that 2.5 to 3.5 pound range is probably the average size fish that I catch on this. And this particular bait, it weighs, I'm guessing this thing weighs probably about 3/4 of an ounce. It casts really good. It skips really good. 6-inch Magdraft, it's really good for like skipping under overhanging trees, skipping underneath boat docks. The thing is an excellent skipping lure to get in those tight conditions there. But this is the average. This is my go-to as far as, the one I just start out with every time. Now, here's when I upgrade to the bigger sizes. First of all, they've got to be biting this, because one of the things you're going to find out about a Magdraft is like they're either they either have the mood and the personality to where they're really biting it good, or they just don't want it at all. And we'll get into the specific conditions here a little bit later. But if you start getting some bites, like on the 6-inch model, and they're starting to hit it pretty good, and you're getting some consistent action, that is when I'll usually upgrade to the little bit bigger sizes. If I know they're biting it and I know they want that particular style of lure, then I'll upgrade to the 8-inch size, trying to get a bigger fish. But one of the things that you got to have when you start upgrading to these 8 and 10 inch size is you got to have the right type of weather conditions for it. Now, we'll go ahead and incorporate the weather here because it's pertinent to this, but the weather conditions for almost any swim bait out there, here is what the ideal conditions are. Most of the time, you need to have water temperatures anywhere between, say, like 55 to 75 degrees is going to be the really good water temperature. You need to have the water clarity of, usually around at least 3 feet. I like 3 to 6 foot water clarity is really important. But in my opinion, the biggest factor to getting bites on any of these is you got to have some type of wind. This bite, and I'm not saying they won't bite it if it's calm, but you need to have some type of surface disturbance. So I usually like about a 10 to 15 mile an hour wind, a pretty significant wind. And I do prefer lower light conditions, like a cloudy day. Now this becomes even more important when you go to the bigger size, because the bigger size, anytime that you go up on this bigger size, you're going to sacrifice the amount of strikes that you get simply because of the size of the lure. And if you don't have those optimum conditions, like cloudy conditions, windy conditions, water temperature and water visibility in that right zone, if you don't have all that together, they're not going to bite it. So the first thing I do is, if I know they're biting the smaller size, I try the 8-inch size to maybe upgrade my size of my fish. Now with the 8-inch size, guys, you're still going to get a 2-pound bass will still hit this, but you've given yourself a lot better chance to catch a truly big fish, like a fish over 5 pounds. Because now, instead of like 2 to 3 pound average on the 6-inch one, you're going up to like a 3 to 5 pound average on the 8-inch size. This bait weighs several ounces. I usually cast it on the flipping stick. We'll get into the equipment a little bit later, but it's a pretty big chunk of plastic. Now the 10-inch model here, guys, there's been very few situations where I go to the 10-inch. This is truly a big bass lure. It weighs 6 ounces. You can't even hardly throw it on a flipping stick. You have to have a stiff action 8-foot rod with it to throw the thing, because it is so heavy. And this thing looks freaking awesome in the water, guys. That head moves like that, and that big wagging tail, it looks great in the water. But you have got to have the right type of water, the right type of lake, and the right type of conditions for this thing to work. you've got to have a lake that has a pretty good population of bigger fish in it. That's why this thing is going to be good in your lakes known for bigger fish. All your Texas lakes, California lakes, Florida lakes are going to be optimum for it. That's the first thing. You got to have fish that will actually hit this thing. The next, you got to have wind. I like at least a 15 to 20 mile an hour hard wind with this. Definitely cloudy, overcast skies. Water temperatures, ideally in the 60s and 70s, are going to be perfect for this. And when you throw the big 10-inch guys, you don't expect to get a lot of bites, because you won't. I mean, if you throw this thing all day long and you catch 2 or 3 or 4 fish on it, you've had a good day. It's sort of like a big glide bait, but you might get the biggest bass of your life in it too. So determining the size of it is critical there. And the final one I want to talk about, guys, we'll talk about how to rig this in a second, is the Megabass Freestyle. Now the Freestyle, it doesn't have any hook in it, and it's designed to be fished weedless, you know, with this type of a wide gap hook with a spinner. I'll rig this up in a second and show you. But anyway, I'm gonna take a quick break here. Kim just texted me something. I gotta check the text. I'll be right back. Hey guys, we're back. Now I'm gonna show you how to rig this Freestyle, and then we're gonna get into colors a little bit, take a little break, and then we're gonna get into the type of equipment that you need to throw it on, and how you wanna work the Magdraft as far as the action impartation, how you wanna impart action on the baits. We'll get into that in a second. And also, guys, I will link all this stuff in my Tackle Warehouse links. I'll put all the 3 different sizes of Magdrafts in there. So if you guys want to order some through that Tackle Warehouse link, that's a really good way to give back to the channel. I appreciate that. Okay, guys, now the Magdraft, I want to talk about this, the Freestyle one, because this is sort of unique. Now, the Freestyle is going to be in a situation where if you got some heavier cover, let's say, for example, you want to throw this thing in some lily pads or some grass beds, or some, you know, throw it around some heavier brush where, you know, you can't, you know, reel it through it without getting hung up with the regular Magdraft. So the Freestyle is really unique in that sense there. So what I like to do is I like to get this large EWG hook with the spinner on it, and I'll link this in the description of the video too, guys, if you want to get some of these. But you simply just screw this into the head of the Magdraft there. And to be honest with you, I don't use this Freestyle too much. I mean, I have a little bit. I know a lot of guys, they really like it, and some of them also, they put it on a jig head and they fish it, you know, deep for, you know, offshore fish, like with the jig head. But anyway, you just screw that in there. You've also got a gap here to put it in, and with that extra wide gap hook, it's really critical to have that extra wide gap because of how thick this is. And then you lay it in on the channel right there. You can see there's a channel of it that lays perfectly flat like that, and then it's got this nice little spinner on there. Now, this was a setup. I fished a FLW, or excuse me, it was a Bassmaster Invitational down at Lake Toho a couple of years ago, and Buddy Gross won the tournament down there with this type of a swim bait setup, with this type of the spinner on it, with the weedless setup. But this is the way that you rig the Freestyle if you want to fish it around some heavy cover like that. A lot of guys like this. I actually prefer the other one with a hook on it myself, but it just depends on the type of cover you're fishing. Okay, guys, let's talk about colors. Now, you'll see if you go into that Tackle Warehouse link, you'll see that there's a bunch of different colors of the Magdrafts, and they come out with new colors all the time. But I want to, instead of like going over specific colors, I want to sort of go over the generalities of the sort of like the type of color out there, not necessarily specific colors, but the type. So the types of colors that you're going to have is, number one, is you got like the translucent finish here. You can see my finger behind it. This is the MB Gizzard Shad right here. So these translucent colors like this is going to be really good in clear water situations. So if you got water visibility that's like over 5 feet, and maybe you don't have quite as much wind, and maybe the sky conditions are a little bit bright, quite a bit of light intensity, this is my number one choice here because it's translucent, it's more subtle. I get a lot of bites in the clear water, tougher conditions out there. This is probably my favorite color, guys, as far as the amount of fish I've caught on it. This MB Gizzard Shad, I think that is the name of this one. The other ones out here, you got several different colors out. The next ones are the more of the traditional, brighter, sort of milky colored swim baits. Now, any color like this is called the whiteback shad right here. Any of these milky colors like this that you can't see through, these are going to be really good in your low light conditions, lots of wind, rainy, cloudy days, and if that water is a little bit off colored. So I don't throw these normally if that water visibility is over like, 4 or 4.5 feet out there. And I especially don't throw these colors if the light intensity is pretty bright. This would be a color that I'd start out like in the morning when it was shady, low light levels, again, clouds, wind, water visibility is closer to 3 feet. That's when these are going to be really good, these more creamy ones. And then you've got a variety of colors out there, guys, sort of like that in between. Sort of some sparkly colors, like this is the sexy shad. You got a lot of different varieties. The main thing what you want to do is when you pick your color is the color selection needs to work completely in correlation with all the environmental conditions and the lake conditions. So when you're deciding a color, you got to take in consideration the visibility of the water. You got to take in consideration the wind speed, because the wind speed is going to reduce visibility in the water too. Skylight conditions, as far as sun, clouds, rain, wind, stuff like that, sunlight angle. And what you want is whatever color that you pick out, you want it, and I talk about this a lot in my videos because it's super important. When you test the color out, you want to put it in the water, run it alongside the boat, and you want it to stand out a little bit, but you want it to blend in a little bit. You don't want for example, like if I was using this more translucent color like this, and it was, say the water visibility is 3 feet, and it was cloudy, overcast, this thing would be too invisible. It wouldn't stand out enough. And that's when I would go to something like this right here. But if I put this in a clear water situation, say I put this color in 5 or 6 foot water visibility with partly cloudy skies, this thing is going to stand out too much. So that's why they've got a lot of good colors that are sort of in between colors, because get that sort of like in a mental picture of it. When you run that next to the boat, look at it and say, okay, that's subtle. It stands out a little bit, but it also is subtle enough where it blends in a little bit. And that is the perfect scenario with that. So experiment with colors. They make quite a few different colors. I'd recommend getting several like that, and you can experiment with the different, conditions that you come up into. But again, other than this one right here, I don't have like a favorite color. I try to mix and match them, with the, conditional changes that I have out there. Also, guys, one other thing, we'll take a quick break and get back to the equipment and everything. A lot of people ask me about changing the hooks out. Now, one of the things that I did is Chris Zaldane, he sort of made the Megabass Magdraft famous. And I talked to Chris a long time about that, specifically about the hook, because I kept wanting to know if there was a better hook. And Chris said, I just use the stock hook. And he's right, guys. The stock hook that comes with the Magdraft is the best hook to use in it. I've experimented with a lot of different hooks out there, and this is, whatever it is, the size and the bite gap of this is the best hook. So that's nice that you don't have to change the hooks out, when you get the bait and everything. Okay, let's take a quick break, guys. I'm going to be back with the equipment I throw it on. We'll go over that, and we'll talk about how to work the Magdraft, and be back in 1 second. Okay, guys, we're back. Now, what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you the rod and line setup that I use for the Magdraft line of swim baits. Then I'm going to show you guys how to work the bait, as far as how you need to position the rod and how you need to retrieve the bait and everything. Now, first of all, for the 6-inch Magdraft, this is by far my favorite setup. This is the Megabass Levante Perfect Pitch. This is a 7-foot 2-inch medium heavy bait cast rod. Perfect setup for the Magdraft. It holds the weight of the Magdraft perfect. The action of it is perfect on it. You can cast it real good. I've experimented with a lot of different rods, and this perfect pitch Megabass Leviathan is by far my favorite. And also, guys, I'll link my 2 Megabass rods that I use on the Magdrafts in the description if you guys are interested in getting some of the rods here. But you definitely want a rod out there, like I said, that matches the bait and is able to handle the weight of that bait that it puts on. And then, I just use 7-to-1 bait cast reel. And for the 6-inch Magdraft, guys, I use 15-pound test Seagarn Vizex probably 90% of the time. If I'm fishing it around heavy cover, say if I'm throwing it next to flooded bushes or something, I may go to 17. But 15-pound test, I've experimented with a lot. And the 15-pound test, it makes the bait fall nice, so you can fish a diversity of water depths with it. And it just handles the bait work real good, and it gives it good action. So 15-pound test, Seagarn Vizex. Now, let's talk a little bit about how you want to work the bait, because one of the things about the Magdraft that's sort of unique about it is the way that the bait works in the water, you can't reel this bait fast, because if you reel it too fast, it's going to blow out to the side, because you've got so much water displacement with this big tail here that this bait is not designed to be worked fast through the water. It's designed to be worked through the water at a slow to medium speed retrieve on there. Ideally, what I like is I want the bait to be moving fast enough through the water where the tail waggles. Once I get that tail waggling, that's the perfect speed with it. But there's a trick to generating the strike with it that I haven't really talked to about a lot of people. But basically, I'll just make the cast, I'll throw it out there, and based upon the depth that I think the fish are, I'm either going to start reeling right off the bat, or I'm going to count down. So say, for example, if I'm fishing a main lake point with it and I think the fish may be suspended, 5 or 10 feet under the water, I'll make my cast with it, I'll count it down to I'll just count to 5 or 10, and then I start my retrieve. Now, the way that you want to retrieve this bait, guys, is you want to point the rod tip straight at the bait. You don't want the rod off to an angle. You want that rod straight at the bait when you're reeling it on there. And the reason you want to do this is because of the half turn I'm going to show you. That's when you get the best action out of it. So what you want to do is point the bait straight at the bait. I usually have the rod at probably about an 8 o'clock position, not quite level to me, but a little bit down. And I'm just slow reeling like that. And about every 5 or 6 cranks, I'll speed it up like that. I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, speed it up like that. And that half turn, guys, is critical. This entire seminar that you're watching, if you get nothing else out of the entire seminar, remember the half turn, because the half turn generates the strikes most all the time. So you got the swim bait, it's just going along nice, slow pace like that. All of a sudden you do the half turn and it goes like that and starts its pace again. So it's just slow like that, darts like that. And usually what happens is when you cast out there and you make that half turn, like you go like that, as soon as you start reeling it, that fish will just hammer it like that. The strikes on the Magdraft, that's another good thing about it. It's one of the funnest strikes you're ever going to have, because when you're reeling that bait straight at it like that in open water and you do that half turn, most of the time when they hit that Magdraft, they freaking hammer it. And it's either like your line will jump like that, or all of a sudden you'll just feel your rod just jolt like that. And that's usually they've got it really good. They've got it down in their throat pretty deep when they do it like that. So it's super fun strike. Now for the other two, for the big mamas, guys, the 8 and 10 inch models here, you got to have bigger equipment. This is the rod that you want to throw the big Magdrafts on, the 8 and 10 inches. This is the Megabass Roshi Leviathan. This is the 8-foot heavy action rod. It's designed to throw lures up to 8 ounces with. This is a big honking heavy duty rod here. And in order to throw these big swim baits like this, you got to have this Leviathan, guys. If you want to fish the big ones, this is a rod that you got to have, because it will handle the weight of that. Because if you try to cast, even if you have a flipping stick like the Megabass Alkalies, you try to cast a 6-inch bait or 6-ounce bait on a flipping stick, it feels like the rod's going to break in half. It's so heavy. So this 8-foot heavy action Leviathan, and again, I'll link it in the Tackle Warehouse description, is the rod that you want. Same deal, guys, 7-to-1 retrieve ratio reel. The line size is different. When I'm using the 8-inch model here, I'm using 20-pound test Seaguar and Vizex. And when I use the 10-inch model, I've upgraded to 25-pound test Seaguar and Vizex. Some guys like monofilament. There's a lot of big swim bait experts out there like Oliver and I. A lot of those guys use 30-pound mono, but I found that 25 fluorocarbon works pretty good for me, even on this big one here out there. But the main thing with that, guys, is generating the strike with the Magdraft through the way that you retrieve the bait is a big part of it. It really is, because you're going to catch some fish just reeling in, once in a while. But there's 2 aspects that you really have to remember. Number one is you have to get the bait in that zone. So the countdown method is really important wherever you think the fish is. And also make sure that your speed of retrieve is right, because if you reel it too slow, that tail's not going to wiggle. It's just going to stay like that. And if you reel it too fast, it's going to blow out to the side. So getting that speed of retrieve down is critical. It comes with a little practice along with that half turn. That adds up to just lots of bites with that. Okay guys, that's a pretty good encompassing little seminar just on the techniques. We're gonna take a little break and we're gonna get back into the meat of the video, which is seasonal patterns, where you wanna fish at, time of year, and where you want to throw the thing, because if you're not throwing it around the fish, you're not going to catch them regardless. So we'll be right back. Okay guys, we're back for the final segment of the video. We're going to talk about where you want to fish a Magdraft at and sort of what you want to look for, conditions, when it works the best, all that type of stuff. Now for a Magdraft and for big swim baits in general, you're going to have 2 windows throughout the course of the year where the things really work the best. Now it's like anything else. You're apt to catch one on at any time of the year, but there's 2 time frames that by far the fish react to this bait better than anything. And the first one is the late pre-spawn, during the spawn, and early post-spawn is the first phase, in other words, springtime. And the second phase is mid to late fall. Usually somewhere around that October to early December time frame, depending upon what part of the country. And for whatever reason, and I think a lot of it has to do with water temperatures and how the fish are positioned in the lake and where the bigger populations are at, but those are the 2 time frames that these things are going to work really good. And depending upon whether it's spring or fall, the areas can be a little bit different. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the spring first. The first window that works really good in there is dictated by water temperatures. When that water temperature, in my opinion, first starts hitting around 55 to 60 degrees. Now, 55 to 60 degree water is going to be your late pre-spawn in most parts of the country. And there's going to be a lot of quality fish starting to move shallow there. And while they will bite it during the pre-spawn, during the late pre-spawn, it's not as good as the post-spawn that we'll get into a little bit. But here's some things that you want to look for during the late pre-spawn. Yeah, the late pre-spawn there. Try to get into those areas where you think those fish are getting really close to bedding in. As far as for example, get in a spawning cove. And instead of going real shallow, where you're actually looking for visible fish, where you think fish are bedding, back out from those areas. And say, for example, if let me line the perfect scenario out. Say you got a lake that's got 4 foot of visibility and you're in a spawning cove. You're in this big spawning cove, and maybe most of the fish, when they're bedding, they're going to be towards the back ends, the back 2/3 of that cove spawning. In the late pre-spawn out there, start at the mouth of the cove. And if you think that most of the fish are going to be bedding in say 6 foot of water or less, get out a little bit deeper and throw that Magdraft, make long casts parallel to those spawning banks in sort of that 6 to 15 foot of water. Count the bait down, maybe 5 or 6 feet, and just start slow rolling it deeper out off of those spawning type areas. That's going to be really, really key with it out there, because a lot of those fish that are getting ready to bed, they're moving into those areas or scouting areas for beds. Maybe some females are hanging out deeper, getting ready to move up once the males, build the nest. But fishing that Magdraft a little bit deeper out on those banks is a good way to catch them during the late pre-spawn, as is the points leading into those spawning areas. So one of the things, my favorite way to do it is say I've got a cove where I think it's going to be a good spawning cove when that water temperature gets in the 60s. I'll start on the point leading into that cove, fish all around that point, and then work down those deeper banks, probably going about 2/3 of the way back in the cove. Now, once that water temperature starts to get in the low 60s, you're going to have a big percentage of the fish that are actually spawning and bedding. That's when I go back into those same type of areas. A lot of it depends on the cover you have and the lake level too, because lake level is going to dictate the type of cover. Some lakes that you go to, you may have grass, you may have rocks, you may have laydowns, you may have flooded bushes, docks, whatever. But during what I consider where a lot of the fish are spawning at, I'm not targeting bedding fish. I'm not looking for bedding fish. I'm just fishing it in those areas. So instead of fishing from the point to maybe halfway back in, when that water temperature gets in the low 60s, I'll go back into those same type of coves, and I'll get maybe halfway back in the cove, and I'll cast that Magdraft all the way to the bank, and I keep it in sight. And this is the only time of year that I hold my rod tip a little bit higher. So I'll still point the rod tip right at the Magdraft, but I'll keep the rod at about a 10 or 11 o'clock position. and I want to keep that Magdraft visually in sight. So I'm usually trying to work at maybe about 6 inches to 1.5 feet under the water, covering that shallow water, all from the halfway back into the cove all the way to the back. And most of the fish that you're going to catch like that, you're going to see them come up and hit it. Again, any of these scenarios, I do like some wind. So wind blowing into those coves is really going to help out. Now that's going to be a good way to catch them all the way until they get done spawning. Now once they're done spawning and the majority of the fish are finished spawning, which usually happens when that water temperature starts to get around 70 degrees, those fish are not just going to leave that cove. There's going to be a lot of those fish that hang around in those same coves and guard fry or whatever that they're going to do. The best way to catch them during the post-spawn like a little bit, there's 2 different ways. If you have a predominant largemouth lake, it's basically fishing the whole cove, casting to the bank, covering water, hitting any shallow targets. If there's some shallow docks, I'm hitting around those dock corners. If there's some laydowns, I'm throwing it on the edge of the laydowns. If there's some bank grass, I'm throwing it around the bank grass. If there's shallow grass a little bit deeper, I'm fishing it in that, shallower grass. I'm just covering water, fishing the entire cove, because during that time of the year, you've got fish coming and going. You've got fish that are staying in there. There's just a lot of fish moving in and out of there. So I cover a lot of water. I'm trying to fish the bait maybe a little bit faster, just fast enough where it doesn't blow out, but just covering water. Start at the mouth of the cove, work all the way to the back, go to the next cove, cover as much water as I can. Now, if you have a mixed species lake where you have some smallmouth bass and some spotted bass and largemouth, that's when you need to get out off those main lake and secondary points, because those post-spawn fish on a lake that's got some clean water and a mixed species of lake, the first thing they'll do is they'll go right back out to those secondary and main lake points. So one of my favorite ways to do it, guys, let's say we're out there, it's the second week of May, we got a windy May day, we got a 15-mile-an-hour south wind. I'll just be running points all day long. I'll put the boat in 10 to 20 foot of water. I'll make long casts to the bank, and I'll just keep that bait a foot or 2 under the water and just cover as many main lake and secondary points as I can. That's a great way to catch them. Also, guys, during the post-spawn there, a lot of times this is like May. This is May or early June we're talking about. And this is traditionally when you have some of the highest water levels of the year. A Magdraft, a 6-inch Magdraft, is absolutely killer if you have some type of flooded cover, like flooded bushes, flooded trees, whatever like that. Reeling that 6-inch Magdraft, along those trees is a really good way to catch them. Now, the only bait that I fish during this time of the year is the 6-inch model, with the exception, sometimes I'll fish the 8-inch model a little bit during the pre-spawn occasionally. But the time that I fish the bigger ones are in the fall time of the year. The 8-inch and the 10-inch are mainly my fall time baits. Now, in the fall time of the year, it's a little bit different on there, because what I'm looking for in the fall time of the year are steep channel banks and bluffs. It's absolutely my favorite, structures for that. I've never done that good on the more lowland impoundments that have grass in it, but I've caught a bunch of fish, not a bunch, but I've caught the majority of the ones I've caught on the big swim baits, the 8 and 10-inch ones, in late October to early December on man-made impoundments that especially have a lot of rocky bluff structures. So if you have an impoundment that has lots of bluffs, like some of the Kentucky lakes, the East Tennessee lakes, some of the Georgia lakes, obviously the Ozark lakes, taking that 8 and 10-inch Magdraft and making long casts parallel down those bluff banks is absolutely the best way to catch them. Conditions are sort of the same. I really like to get out early or late in the day. It helps if you got some shade off the side of those bluffs. Once you lose your shade, the bite gets a lot tougher. So I want low light conditions. When I'm fishing that big giant swim bait, I want the visibility reduced as much as possible, but I still want the clear water. So I'm looking for water visibility, again, of around 4 feet, but I'm looking for windy conditions, 15, 20 mile an hour winds, cloudy conditions, rainy conditions. And when you have the combination of the clear water, the deep water access from the bluffs, there's a lot of opportunity to catch some quality fish, because in the fall time of the year, a lot of those fish will get out off those bluffs and suspend based upon the clarity of the water. Sometimes I'm fishing it over 5 foot of water, sometimes 15, sometimes over 15 to 25 foot of water. And those big swim baits will pull those bigger fish out of real deep water. If you've got 4 foot of clarity on the lake you fish, 4 or 5 foot of clarity, you can pull a fish out of 20 foot of water on it. And especially it's good, guys, if you have some type of standing or submerged timber. That really makes those larger swim baits good. The big swim baits are also good on riprap, guys, in the fall time of the year. Dam riprap, bridge ripraps, those are other good areas to fish them on, especially if you got some wind. But anyway, guys, that's just a good overview of the Magdraft. It is a fish catching bait. I fished a lot of swim baits and glide baits and everything, and without a doubt, the Magdraft series is the most productive for actually catching fish. I mean, big swim baits and big glide baits are notorious about getting fish's attention and not biting it. But for whatever reason, they will hit that Magdraft. I mean, it really, really triggers strikes. It's a bait you definitely got to have in your box there. So anyway, guys, hope you guys got something out of the seminar, and try a couple of those Magdrafts and see what you guys think about it. And we'll be back next week. We'll see you.